overall business did grow quite well, closing higher than 20% year on year, ending September 2021 compared to last year. And a lot of that growth is not unique in its growth drivers to the last time we spoke. Voice, which is typically your calling between customers, still grew quite well by about 12%. And this primarily came out of, number one, an increase in the number of customers that we serve, the increased subscriber numbers as well, resulting from some of the new areas of the country that we are now covering in form of network that we're not covering before. This year we've rolled out at least 45 areas where there was no coverage before at all. And this year they're being served by MTN Rwanda. So voice revenue naturally follows the growth of subscribers and our increase in population coverage. Voice is one of the lower business drivers, but when you come to the big hitters, definitely mobile money stands head and shoulders across the rest of the business, growing in excess of 50%, which remains, to my knowledge, the fastest part, or the fastest growing part of the business. And within mobile money, we still have close to 80% predominantly coming from person-to-person transfers and also cash outs. But interestingly though, other advanced services, be it savings, loans, merchant payments, that grew to the tune of about 10% as a percentage of revenue. So that's also encouraging in the sense of the future of mobile money as a business. Data is another one. Data has grown encouragingly as well, in the sense that we have just over 2 million people right now who are actively using our mobile internet services. And this has grown by about 500,000. Last year we closed at about 1.5. So you see the number of people who, number one, have smartphones and therefore access mobile internet is also growing. And we saw data revenue grow also above 20%. When we put out the request for the syndicated loan, obviously we don't just look at the immediate need right now. We tend to do cash flow projections for at least 48 months looking forward. So as a business, we foresaw that the 64 billion that we took out is more than sufficient, not only to handle the investments through the license renewal, but also to cover some of our planned capital investments going into next year. So at the moment, of course, market dynamics change, requirements change. There could be some interesting developments we can never predict. But for the moment, we don't foresee that we'll be going out into the market for the second half of the installment. What we had communicated to our shareholders in our half-year results was that between the syndicated loan that we took out and the cash that we hope to generate from the operations itself, we are likely going to be able to meet that obligation for the second installment. The conversation around mobile money and MoMoPay has really been an interesting one. And maybe just to take a bit of a step back into the history of MoMoPay. Before the pandemic hit, we had a merchant base, an active merchant base of about between 1,000 and 2,000. So MoMoPay was a product that existed back then. Then, of course, as the pandemic hit, we had discussions with the central bank and, consolidated as an industry around how can we encourage the use of digital payments, as you know. And the suggestion around, okay, let's zero rate transactions to really try and encourage those people who are shying away from these digital payment systems because of fees. And coming into this year, when we finally reinstated the fees, we had the service free for 18 months. By the time we're hitting August this year, we're sitting at about 60,000, hovering between 59 and 60,000. And obviously the debate ensued: should we reinstate fees? Should we not? But at the end of the day, from a business perspective, we always have to make sure that every player within our ecosystem is remunerated adequately. And while we as MTN, we are the front of mobile money, there's so many people behind us and around us who support this ecosystem to run the way it runs. And we have, for instance, as MTN, we have 6 distribution partners across the country who pump in float into the entire system to make sure that there's liquidity there. On top of that, we have these 45,000 agents who are across the country who, for every single transaction, whether it's a deposit or a withdrawal, they're remunerated based on commission. So it was a tough call, but a call that we had to make really for the sustainability of the business and specifically of that product line in terms of reinstating the fees. But even in reinstating the fees, the thought process was, look, I mean, volumes have grown, so do we necessarily still have to reinstate at 1%? And then the decision came to reduce it by almost half and reinstate it at 0.05. So volumes have come down. The good thing, though, is that while the value of transactions may have been reported to come down, what we're seeing is that the number of merchants has remained relatively stable. We're still above 50,000 on average every month. And in terms of the number of transactions, that also has come down, but not in excess of 10%, I don't think. I think I would encourage merchants as well to embrace the fact that, the fact that we're going cashless, we will see other products coming through as well. MoMoPay is not the beginning and the end, There's so many other products that are coming down the line, whether it's mobile business platforms where merchants will now be able to more adequately manage their, digital platforms and things like that. We're talking to people like the MasterCard environment. There are a lot more integrations that we foresee will come, but some of those investments have to be catered for by cash that is generated from the entire ecosystem. When we talk about the impact of COVID-19 on organizations, we tend to focus more on the negative revenue impact that a lot of organizations have faced. What we saw, back in March of last year is, some residential areas from that one day to the next, where people were shifted into working and learning from home. Residential areas traffic in terms of voice calls and data growing by 50%, 75%, in some areas even growing by 100%. Then you'd see downtown CBD areas, almost going down to completely zero. Our job then was to make sure that where we were congesting or where we were seeing a very drastic growth in traffic, we very quickly expand. It took us a step back in terms of really rethinking our investment profile as well, where, to your point, we would be thinking of, for instance, not necessarily investing in home connectivity as an example, or we'd be thinking of, forecasting and investing for a certain level of traffic. But now the traffic profile completely changed. So if you really think about it, since May last year up until now, has really been about us, finding our stride in this new investment requirement that is there to really match and exceed the need that exists today. But the reality is there was a point in time where our rollout and our capacity increases was trailing slightly behind the demand that was there. A lot of the emphasis and resources that we have went into technology investments this year. In total, if I was to speak numbers, last year, for instance, we invested globally in technology about $22 million. This year, that grew to 32, both between IT and the network. Next year, we're foreseeing that that's going to grow to about 40 because the investment profile has completely changed. This year, if you're to ask me how many sites MTN Rwanda has rolled out, we've rolled out in excess of about 140. That's going to close the year. And this is versus 80 last year. So you could see the number of sites also has almost doubled. And we're looking to put in almost 200 sites going into next year, just to make sure that the demand that we are foreseeing and this traffic pattern that has now completely changed is actually catered for. And for consumers, I get it, completely. I mean, when we talk in the number of sites, we talk about expansion, capacity upgrades, it really means nothing. At the end of the day, a consumer just wants to pick up the phone and be able to connect. But we have as customers to bear with us while we catch up with, the rollouts that need to happen, the investments that need to be made, but the commitment is 100% there. When we kicked off Rwanda in December of 2019, it was really born out of the thought process of, listen, smartphone penetration is relatively low, and if we keep on doing what we've always done, we're probably going to keep on getting what we've always gotten. So in the first 3 months, we had ramped up about 44,000 smartphone pledges, and we were quite on an upward trajectory in terms of the number of smartphones that were being pledged. Of course, COVID hit, so if you're to ask me, what was your dream? I promise you I could have dreamt of 1 million smartphones more than 44,000, right? But I still believe that 44,000, is significant a number for, an idea that ran literally just for 3 months before the pandemic hit. And in terms of impact of the 44,000 plus devices that were pledged, about 26,000, 27,000 were actually honored and delivered to us. The pandemic did slow down the campaign in a couple of ways. So number one, obviously spend became more of a concern for individuals, for companies, for public institutions alike. So you did see a slowdown of pledges immediately. And then also in terms of distribution, I remember before the first lockdown hit, we had managed to do, I think it was about 2 distributions. And you know, that in itself gave confidence to the people who had pledged, say, oh, it's actually a very legit and business impactful campaign. So that's also contribute. But once we slowed down those distributions, you know, dragging out also into 2021, you could see a whole lot less contributions coming forward. But to be honest, I sleep very easy at night knowing that there are 26,000 people today who have a smartphone who didn't have one yesterday. And I think what's more interesting for us, which was one of the concerns that a lot of people within the communities, within media, were asking to say, you know, are you not afraid that people will take these smartphones and maybe sell them and not use them and not see the value in them? But we're very deliberate about when we are distributing these smartphones, can we make sure that people understand how to switch them on, how to charge them, what they can do with them? So we would have you know, a fleet of digital ambassadors trying to really educate and sensitize people as to how to use them. And when we look at the activity levels on these devices, because we do keep track, you know, are they still active on the network? Have they completely switched off? So we can maybe do community outreach, but we do see more than 90% of these devices still very much active. And the fact that I think MTN also made the first 3 months of internet usage free on those devices encourages them to use. So really encouraged by the success of a private-public partnership in a sense, and not just private-public between MTN Rwanda and Ministry of ICT, no, but it was really everybody coming together. And I think for me, that's the greatest lesson, the power of involving every single you know, institution, individual behind a common cause can really yield massive results. I have this conversation with many business leaders in our industry, outside our industry, in industries that are completely not related to ours. And when you speak to everybody, we're all on this wave of digital transformation, right? Because it is a time for digital applications and things like that. And it's a great time to be alive in, right? But the picture that I tried to paint to them is, look, it's great that we're building all these applications, all these tools that are built for a smartphone device, but we need to understand that there's only 1 person out of 5 in the population of Rwanda that has a smartphone. If we do not crack this, the audience to which you can sell and onboard your digital applications in whatever field that you're in will be limited. So it is a branding platform that everybody needs to pay attention to for the sustainability of all our businesses which are currently going through a digital transformation drive. I just came back from a regional tour across the country. So we do trade visits, and it's something that for every market stop that I've had in the last week, I've asked the question, so why is it that people don't have a smartphone? And the answer is unanimously the same. The issue is price. All right, that initial entry price, that out of pocket of 30,000, 40,000, 50,000, when it's weighed against the perceived value of a smartphone, it's not something that citizens are typically willing to part with. So I do think the solution, a sustainable solution, lies in bringing down the initial purchase-in price of the device. But of course, from a smartphone manufacturer perspective, when you speak to any manufacturers, including our partners, Mara, they'll tell you, well, to build a smartphone actually does cost, because you have chipsets, you have all these components that need to be manufactured and sometimes even imported. So the cost of manufacturing the device itself is high. But where we see opportunities probably in around device financing models where, instead of a customer paying 50,000 upfront, they're able to pay, small chunks over a 48-month period of time. That's something that we're going to experiment with soon. So let's see, I do think the solution lies somewhat in a model like that that's going to sustainably take us into the future. And I know some other markets have found some sort of success in it. But price and finding a solution around price is really where the key is.